Hello YouTube bro, my name is Nicholas Montez and you're watching my YouTube channel, The Teenage Movie Critic. And welcome back to my YouTube channel, everybody. In today's video, we're doing it. We're reviewing the newest blockbuster superhero movie in theaters right now, Superman, which is not only a normal comic book movie, but it's also the start of James Gunn's brand new DCU, and it's also a new James Gunn movie at the same time. What were your thoughts down below? Before we get started talking about Superman, I think it's best to talk about the big three elephants in the room, and that is the fact that this is not a normal DC movie. This is not a Joker folie à deux. This is a big film for Warner Brothers and DC. That this is like risking everything. That this is starting off a whole new universe. This is a fresh reboot, a new Superman, a new universe of characters, and all the above. And I think the best way to start talking about this is, that this is essentially a rebirth version of the DCEU, which about 12 years ago, in 2013, we had a DC movie called Man of Steel, directed by Zack Snyder, and Henry Cavill was Superman. And that movie started off a 10-year universe of films called the DCEU, where it was essentially like the MCU, but not well received. And a lot of reasons for that was because, a lot of people didn't really like Man of Steel and the way they portrayed Superman, and also a lot of a few of the starting films, such as Batman v Superman, Suicide Squad, were not well received. And while I will say there's actually a few films I did enjoy from the DCEU, such as Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Shazam. I really did like Birds of Prey. I thought that was probably my favorite film of the franchise at the time. And then we had films like Wonder Woman 1974, which I actually did like. You had Zack Snyder's Justice League, the Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, Black Adam, and then, of course, Shazam 2 kind of sucked. The Flash, which was kind of good. Blue Beetle was probably my favorite DC film of the time, and then Aquaman 2. So, if I'm being honest, the franchise had a lot of good stuff in it, but also the movies, it wasn't really a well-connected universe. And a lot of the writing choices behind it and the way it kind of fit into this universe, it didn't do well. But then in the last year of the DCEU, DC decided to hire James Gunn, the director of Guardians of the Galaxy and the Suicide Squad, to come in and be the basically Kevin Feige of a fresh new universe of DC films that essentially will be a reboot universe of the DCEU, and will basically be a better version of that, of what that universe could have been. And so yeah, that's basically it. I have some other thoughts, but let's talk about this Superman stuff. One of my thoughts of them getting a new Superman actor, to be honest, I didn't really have too many thoughts on it, and mainly because back then I wasn't really a Superman fan. I didn't really know much about Superman. I heard that, he came from the planet Krypton, and he was adopted by this family in Kansas, which, honestly, the story just seems very similar to Hercules, in a certain sense, because, Hercules was not raised in Kansas and then brought to Metropolis in a human city. No, that's not what that is. But it's sort of like that. It has that hero's journey. And when I mean Hercules, I'm talking about the Disney film Hercules, not like Dwayne Johnson's Hercules. And while I sort of like DC characters, most of the DC heroes that I would actually end up watching were really Batman, and I guess you could also say Aquaman. Those were and maybe Shazam too. So I never really I never watched any Superman movie. And then also for the last for the last 7 years since I became a DC fan, I have never seen a Superman movie in my life up until this year, after watching the original Christopher Reeve film, to where that was on, and that was at that point where I actually had an opinion on Superman and why Man of Steel and you know, Zack Snyder's universe of films was so divisive. And that I watched, it wasn't until May of this year, May 30th, when I watched Superman 1978, and I was like, I now understand this character. Not only do I understand this character as a superhero, as a piece of cinema, but I also understand why this character is so good. Because I watched the Superman trailer back in December, and I'm like, this looks really good, but it just looks like another great superhero movie. I don't know what they'll do with it, but it looks really good. And of course, it's James Gunn, so I'm pretty sure he'll cook with it. But also, after watching Superman 1978, my hope went up, because this character is all about. This character is a god. Is basically a god. He has laser eyes, you know, freeze breath. He can fly. He has super strength. He can. He's faster than a speeding bullet. He's so strong. No, he can't die. And his only weakness is a rock. Is a green rock. And it only takes a certain foe to defeat him. And at the same time, he has all these great qualities of a superhero, of someone that can destroy a planet, but he doesn't choose to do that. He's a character that decides to get a cat out of a tree, decides to get Lois Lane an interview with him, and all this great stuff, and all the small stuff. And I was rewatching Man of Steel this week, and I'm like, this doesn't feel anything like what Superman is supposed to feel. Now, and I say that because I'm like, I watched this, and I'm like, Richard Donner, Christopher Reeve, they understood Superman. And I'm not against, you know, wanting to do Superman in, you know, with 21st century special effects, and, you know, doing all the, you know, the big Superman action, and, you know, him punching bad guys in the face and him flying at super speed, and it looks really cool. But there's a certain way you gotta do it to make it earnest and feel great, and feel inspirational, and feel a sense of hope. And rewatching Man of Steel, I don't think Zack Snyder was able to do that. I feel like I think what he got right was the action scenes, the score, especially with Hans Zimmer doing it. But I think one thing he didn't do right was the sense of hope. Every time we went to Metropolis and Clark's interacting with Lois Lane, or Superman's interacting with Lois Lane, there was no chemistry. The whole world felt bland. It was so dark and bleak. And honestly, I'm like, this... Obviously, there are certain movies that can look dark and look gray, and that because that's how the world in the comics, or the way that it's script, is able to do it. But in this concept, it doesn't work well, especially for a world that is old-fashioned, and it's colorful, and it's so pop, and it pops. Zack Snyder didn't pop that at all, and I was really disappointed. I am now disappointed with it, and honestly, like, I kind of like some of the Man of Steel and Batman v Superman stuff a little less now. And I know that, like, you know, it seems like I've just become a big Superman fan in the last 2 months, but that's honestly how I feel, and it kind of makes sense after watching all these videos and being like, Man of Steel, Zack Snyder's better, and all that stuff. I'm like, you do realize his own father didn't allow him to save him because he didn't want him to get exposed. Now, I do like the idea that Superman, there's an idea of Superman being, like, brought out into the world, but there's a better way you can have actually done that. And making it full of wonder. And not letting his own father die by a tornado. That was weird. And then I guess the final thing to talk about here is, of course, James Gunn. Of course, what are my thoughts on him leading an entire universe of films and TV shows? It's interesting. I'm not quite sure what I feel about it, because obviously if he can direct a movie, I think he'll do good with that. Leading an entire universe and being like this universe is Kevin Feige has me a little bit curious, but I'm not sure how they'll do it. As for him directing Superman, what were my thoughts on it? Part of me was excited because I think his track record on comic book movies were great. Of course, at least for the first 2 years of his filmography. I just recently watched Slither. That was really good. He directed Super, which Slither was a horror movie, and then he directed Super, which is a superhero movie with Kevin Bacon and stuff. And then he did the first 2 Guardians films, and then the 2020s kind of entered a whole new era for him, to where he directed the Suicide Squad, where basically after he got fired by Disney, it like opened up his way of letting his inner self being able to be expressed a little bit more. In which some ways, a lot of people got more interested in him after the Suicide Squad. But honestly, I was actually a lot more interested in him after Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 came out. And it could be that you know, I was like so used to the PG-13 setting, and by the same I'm like, what if you had a PG-13 setting with a mixture of a hard PG-13 setting? I thought that was great, but also Guardians 3 was like my favorite film of the last decade, and so that like put my expectations really high, because I'm like, can anything beat Guardians 3 for me? Because now that I've seen, especially after seeing the original Superman, I'm like, oh, if James Gunn actually understands Superman, maybe this could actually work. But that's also where it falls flat, because James Gunn is known for doing, you know, ensembles of characters that are nobodies to anyone, but they actually become somebodies and become these great stars for Hollywood and characters. And you're taking Superman, which is the most popular superhero on the planet. How do you do something different with him and do something interesting with him? And now we can finally talk about my thoughts. And I thought Superman 2025 was super peak. The gun is not jammed. It was fully loaded. It was awesome. Where to begin with this film? I am kind of getting tired of talking, but I don't care. I saw a peak movie. I saw a really great film. Let me get some water real quick. Sorry about that. So, with Superman, I guess the first thing we should talk about here is just the fact that this is probably the most comic bookiest movie of all time. That, as we're starting the new universe, now technically Creature Commando started it, but that was the start of the animated and TV shows. This is starting the movies and essentially the universe. And what are my thoughts on it? I think it's interesting that we're doing this. I like that it's a comic booky world, that basically all the things that have been established about comic book films in the last many years, this film doesn't need to establish it, because it essentially expects you to know of how this works. That it's a lived-in universe to where we don't just have Superman, we have a Green Lantern, we have a Hawk Girl, we have a Mr. Terrific. We also have a Lex Luthor that can make pocket universes and cause time ripples, space ripples throughout Metropolis. And we have kaijus attacking the city. And I think that is just really cool world building, and we're also like establishing countries with like Baravia and Genrupor and Valmir or whatever, like all these different countries. It's really cool. And as for the world building, we of course got to talk about Superman, and I think David Corenswet did really well as Superman. Of course, he felt like the better version, like, not only him, but I feel like he captured the spirit of Christopher Reeve, but also this entire movie, I feel like, captured the spirit of Christopher Reeve Superman, the story of Man of Steel, of what that could have been a better version of it, and basically bringing in those type of action sequences that we could have gotten in that movie if he wasn't killing people. And what I loved about David Corenswet's version of Superman was essentially what he honestly did so well is essentially what I love about this movie that this film does so well is it kind of portrays a film about that kindness has become old-fashioned. That's kind of how Superman is portrayed in the movie. That he's basically an old-fashioned guy. He talks in an old-fashioned way. He has his own funny ways of cursing, like, oh golly, and all that stuff. What the hey, dude? And all that funny stuff. And not only that, but he's also kind of naive to where he kind of trusts people easily, to where he kind of, like, there's a scene where he kind of talks about that he interviews himself as Superman because he knows what he believes is right, and he in that case, he also trusts his girlfriend to interview him, but he also doesn't want to do that because he knows what Lois thinks. And you see how he kind of erupts, and like no matter what he decides, the other person will think something differently. And I'm like, why are you acting like this? What's the deal here? Like, people are gonna die. Why is it bad to save people of human consent? Like, it's crazy. And then when Lex Luthor kidnaps his dog, he decides to turn himself in because he believes that they just want him for questioning, and he believes that maybe if I turn myself in, I can get more answers, and then I can just break free. And no, that's not what happens. He gets imprisoned, he gets kryptonite poisoned, and he has someone die on his watch because they wouldn't tell him who they are. And that's pretty crazy, if I'm not gonna lie. And it's the type of thing that I feel like most people can relate to. It's kind of crazy the last few superhero films, like Thunderbolts and Superman, have been kind of the more relatable films, where Thunderbolts was relatable on mental health. This one's more relatable on how kindness has become old-fashioned. You know, as a lot of us have gone into high school and middle school, that a lot of the people that we meet nowadays have like, especially our own friends that we had in elementary school, they're like now kind of mean, they're a little bit more gross, and they've changed into these people, and like, and it's like, you kind of wonder why that is what it is. And it's almost like, has kindness become an old-fashioned statement to where it's like, if you say hi to someone on the street, it almost becomes like unnormal anymore. Like, people look at you funny. Like, what the fuck are you talking to me for? Like, it's so weird. And obviously they don't do that in the film, but there's there's all this stuff of Lex Luthor hating on Superman because he's an alien, and tries to pin on him that he was sent here to kill people. But what his parents did for him if anything, the reason he believed that message was because of what his Earth parents taught him. So I really enjoyed what they did with Superman here, and that instead of listening to your Kryptonian parents, you now have your adopted parents, your real parents that taught you the greatness of values. Other things to talk about in this film, I loved the action in this film. It's a little bit cartoonish, but that's kind of what you would expect from the film, especially for a very comic booky movie. The Superman action's pretty great. What are my thoughts on Superman getting beat down a lot? Don't really have too much to say about it, just because it makes him a little bit more vulnerable, which is another great aspect about his character, that, like, this movie makes him human, and I love that's what the film is about. Like, you know, kindness is wholehearted. Like, you gotta remember, at the end of the day, we're all human beings. Actually, no, wait. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. Beings. Like, not beings. B-I-I-N-G. B-E-A-N-S. That's what I'm trying to say. But yeah, the action was insane in this movie, and there's a lot of just great heroic moments with him. And in some ways, James Gunn actually found a way to kind of humanize his character and go through obstacles through the fights. I really enjoyed that aspect. As for the other stuff, I also really loved, the score, as it, I wish there was a scene in the movie where the score can just blare and just go about it, but unfortunately they didn't do it. I also really liked the cast in the film with Nicholas Hoult as Lex Luthor. I thought he had that stuff of the High Evolutionary from Guardians 3, and I really enjoyed that. It's not, of course, on that same level, but it's almost there, and I really enjoyed it. Lot of baddies in this movie, apparently. You got Lois Lane, Rachel Brosnahan, you get Cat Grant, you get Miss Tessmacher, which I didn't realize that's who she was. I thought she was like a new character. But she's also kind of bad too. And then you also have Hawkgirl, who, I guess we can talk. Lois Lane was also really cool. I like Jimmy Olsen and how he's involved in the plot. I like Perry White. I like some of the Daily Planet characters. They were fun. And I liked the set of the Daily Planet. I kind of wish, and also that's one other thing, I wish we spent a little bit more time at the Daily Planet and spending time with Clark Kent, which there's not a lot of Clark Kent in the movie. It's only that one scene at the Daily Planet. And I like to kind of make this, like, thing that he has, like, hypno glasses, so that's why it makes sense for the glasses to make him just invisible. As for the other characters, one of the unique things is that this movie feels like lived in universe, so it has other heroes existing. So you get the Justice Squad with Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, who is played by Nathan Fillion. You have Hawkgirl, played by Isabel Merced, and then you have a new character that I never heard of before called Mr. Terrific. So I guess we'll talk about him, which, if anything, he's probably the biggest scene stealer of the film. As, if you don't remember, this is Eddie Gathegi, who was essentially that guy in X-Men First Class who said he could adapt to anything, but he couldn't adapt to something, and then he died. And he was kind of underutilized, but this film reutilizes him in a brand new and fresh way, and honestly makes him a great character in the film. And to be honest, I remember I heard that he was very involved in the plot, that, he was going to be helping Lois Lane. But I thought that, that he was, because, there's a point in the film where Superman gets captured and Lois Lane tries to recruit the Justice Squad to go on and help him. And I was thinking, the Justice Squad's going to go along for the ride. And Mr. Terrific was just going to have the best moments, and Hawkgirl and Guy Gardner were going to have, the background moments, and they weren't really going to do much. But no, Mr. Terrific actually goes with Lois Lane to this pocket universe and actually tries to help. And he's like one of the few main characters. He's not really with the Justice Squad a lot in the movie, which I find very interesting. And to be honest, he really gets a lot of great moments in the film. Even that one like James Gunny action sequence with fun. It's a really cool action sequence. It's almost like Yondu, the Yakko arrow. So I thought that was really fun. As for the other Justice Squad members, Guy Gardner, played by Nathan Fillion, it was, of course, interesting, considering the fact that Nathan Fillion is a very close friend of James Gunn, and I think he's been in every single project of James Gunn's films and shows. And I also have a friend who watches the show The Rookie, and I've seen him in a few clips, so I also know him because of that. And the fact that he actually gets a role in here and not just some side nameless character is actually kind of fun. And I thought, him playing this dumb version of a Green Lantern Corps was kind of fun. And obviously the bold cut is stupid, but it works for his character. And then the final one on here, which is Isabel Merced as Hawk Girl. I thought her character was okay. I will say she's pretty bad. Of course, coming off of Dora and Last of Us Season 2 and Instant Family, she's great. And it's honestly crazy to see how far she's come, especially starring in Nickelodeon stuff and Disney Channel, I think. Yeah, I think she was mostly Nickelodeon. But, yeah, it's great to see how far she's come. I was also surprised that they were casting her as that character. Because I'm like, isn't she, technically very young? But then I'm like, no, she's actually, grown up now. We also have Metamorpho Man, who can, morph into anything. He can, morph into Kryptonite, and he also has, an alien son. I thought he was pretty cool. Kind of underutilized. I kind of wish we had more of him. Anything else to talk about the film? The cameo of Supergirl was fun. And then I guess the final thing, which I keep forgetting to talk about the film, Krypto was one of the main standouts. He does get captured for a minute, but he's pretty great throughout the movie. And he gets a lot of great moments. He reminded me of my dog for a little bit. And he was just a great little character. And then I guess the final thing to talk about here was really just the sets. From the opening scene where we're going to the Fortress of Solitude, that whole set, and we're seeing the the Superman robots and all that stuff. All that was just great to me. And I really enjoyed that set. And then I also really enjoyed the Daily Planet set. I liked the Pocket Universe prison set. I liked the way the city of Metropolis looked. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the positives. And I do have a few negatives, unfortunately, that it feels a little bit more nitpicking. I'm not saying this is a perfect movie. It has a few issues, though. First off, I think there's a few times where this movie does go a little bit cheesy and all that stuff. I think the plot line of Clark's parents being dictators and sending Clark to Earth, not because to keep him safe, but also to rule over it, it seems kind of weird a little bit. But it could be that they're just misguided, so I'm going to probably keep that in mind. But I think my big issue with the film is that they're trying hard to make this an established universe with characters and all this stuff. And you basically have a threat happening almost every single day, every single week. And when you have this kaiju battle happening, and nobody's really running away. Like, you have some people running away, but... And you do have Superman not knocking down any buildings with the kaiju. You actually do have him saving people from that. Saving a squirrel, saving a dog, saving a little girl. But even then, saving, like, a little girl that moment, it doesn't really work because if the kaiju is there for that long, why is the girl still there? Like, wouldn't she get hit? Like, it makes no sense. Like, I understand if it gets used to at this point, but, like, why would anybody live in Metropolis? It's weird. I don't know. I do hope that they probably do a better job at doing this film, or this universe, with, like, Gotham, as to, like, how exactly are they going to establish, you know, people still living in Gotham? I don't know. But honestly, I think that's really, like, my only flaw with the movie, honestly. My only few flaws with the movie. I guess the runtime does kind of ruin things a little bit for me. That, like, there's a few scenes, whether it's, like, emotional beats, I kind of wish lasted a little longer. Especially between Lois and Clark, or even his parents, I thought could have been done a little bit better. But they still worked for me. I don't think it was a weak point, but overall, that's kind of my overall thoughts on the movie. I honestly just really loved it. Probably my second favorite movie of the year, and I think it's probably better than Thunderbolts. Sinners is still great, but this is easily second best. I think James Gunn nailed it, and I'm honestly excited to see Peacemaker Season 2 next month. I'm so excited. But that is my review for Superman 2025. I'm so excited for the future of the DCU and James Gunn's brand new universe, and the fact that we'll be able to probably compete with the best of the best, as we're finishing Phase 6 right now. We're starting Phase 6 in the next 2 weeks. And that is going to be competing with the freshness of the DCU. That's going to be interesting. I'm excited to see this. All right, so that's it for now. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. If you can like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.